Now I'd like to talk about some voices who rebut Rick Hess and talk about the argument no, public schooling should not be redefined. It should be supported. Now we have four different readings that rebut Rick Hess. The first being Linda Nathan. She was the executive director of the Center for Artistry and Scholarships, founding headmaster of Boston Arts Academy. She supports the development of project-based learning and arts immersion education and consults nationally and internationally. Now, Linda argues that Hess's real agenda is not to strengthen public education, but to privatize it through vouchers and for-profit takeover schemes. And we'll see this repeating in the other rebuttals, where a lot of folks agree that we need to reimagine public education, but we don't need to privatize it. Linda Nathan argues that public schools have a larger and more democratic purpose than do private schools. Their purpose is to be open to everyone, regardless of disability, wealth, status, race, or religion, whereas private and parochial schools do not have the same mission. They should not have entrance exams. Public schools cannot explicitly exclude students who don't fit preferred profiles. Linda also argues that educational decisions should be made by citizens of the community, not by shareholders of for-profit businesses. That public schools create more open dialogue about controversial topics and more acceptance of those issues, and that society needs schools that help young people learn and practice life skills necessary to be participants of a vibrant democracy. Skills like asking questions, using evidence, making arguments, and recognizing fallacies and lies. Now, the second rebuttal comes from Joe Nathan, director of the Center for School Change at the University of Minnesota. He also helped write the nation's first charter public school law and has done a bunch of other work. He begins his rebuttal with three questions in response to Frederick Hess. These are related to the question, what is public? What is public schooling? And his three questions are, what is public about suburban districts in which price of admission to local school is the ability to purchase homes more than $1 million? What is public about inner city schools with admission tests that screen out all students with mental disabilities and over 95% of students in surrounding districts? What is public about preventing some inner city students from attending magnet schools just a few blocks from home that receive $1,500 per student more than the neighborhood school they attend? Nathan agrees with Hess in that there should be more public school choice and that more funding would help reduce the achievement gap and help all students to achieve their potential. He believes that public schools should be working to close the gap between different races, and that opportunity, like Hess, he agrees that opportunity to try new approaches is vital for education. But he states that public school should not necessarily be defined as narrowly as Hess defines it, but that public school should be open to all kinds of students. Public schools should not use admission tests. Public schools should follow due process procedures for students and faculty. They should use state-approved standardized measures to monitor student progress. And they should have a goal to close the achievement gap between white students, minorities, and low-income students as a measurable goal. Ray Bacchetti had a 33-year career at Stanford University, vice president of planning and management, with a doctorate in philosophy of education and higher education. Now, he rebutted many of the arguments that Rick Hess put forth, and he argues that public schools support conversations with differing viewpoints that further student support for an ideal or challenges it. And he was really arguing that rather than making the disagreements that people have about what public schooling is go away by having all these different types of schools that people can go to avoid confronting each other and actually having dialogue, he argues that we should keep everything public and keep people together, and we should all work together to come up with a joint definition of what public schooling should be, rather than just fracturing off the different ideas and never having dialogue. Now, the last rebuttal comes from Evans Clinchey, a senior consultant at the Institute for Responsive Education at Northeastern University. He agrees with Hess that there is a need to reinvent and reimagine American public education system, but he argues that that should not be done by privatizing the public schools, but keeping the schools public and controlled locally by the communities and coming up with new and innovative ways to run these public schools. He believes that the states have imposed a uniform, authoritarian, high and rigorous standards and standardized testing for all students that are not equitable and are preventing innovation, and that in order to respond to the needs of choice and innovation and different ideas, that the states and the federal government need to back off on the standardized testing and remedy the financial gap between wealthy schools and those that serve minority students. Again, he believed that we should abandon standardized testing, return control to citizens of that local community, limit state and federal interference, guarantee equal funding, and protect the rights of all parents. Okay, so some arguments against expanding the definition of public schools, or arguments against school choice. Competition will drain money from public schools without giving them the wherewithal to improve. This will decrease public accountability and oversight, will potentially increase racial and ethnic segregation, will undercut the notion of the common school and a common culture, will further concentrate the least advantaged students in the